Perfect. And then if I may hand over to Caroline to kick us off.
Thank you so much, Yusra, and hello everyone. I'm the co-founder of an education charity here in Australia called Ourschool, and my name is Caroline Milburn, as you've probably gathered from the panel speaker poster. Ourschool is devoted solely to helping state high schools establish and grow alumni networks to benefit each school's students, teachers, and their school communities. And we do 5 key things with our partner schools here in Australia to establish their alumni programs. We find and connect with alumni. We invite alumni back to school to inspire students about career pathways. We invite alumni to provide work experience for students. We encourage alumni to provide philanthropic support such as student scholarships or donations to school fundraising projects at our partner schools. And we also collect basic key performance indicator data about the alumni program to show evidence of its impact to students, teachers, and each school community that we partner with. And in Australia, this is actually a radical and even revolutionary program. And that's because there has never been a tradition in our state high school sector of state schools mobilising their alumni networks in a systematic, well-organised and professional way. In fact, we're actually unique. In Australia's 8 states and territories, there has never been an organisation doing what we do here at our school. And actually, in the last couple of years, in fact, we began our school as a pilot program in 2017 and launched our fully fledged program in 2019. We've found there is enormous goodwill and enthusiasm among alumni to help their old schools in meaningful, practical ways. And schools here in Australia and of course in other countries are facing well-documented challenges in schooling. And some of the key problems that many teachers, policymakers and governments are struggling with include some very obvious ones, which I'm sure the audience members will be familiar with. And to name just a few: student disengagement from learning, low teacher morale, where in Australia, for example, 1 in 5 early career teachers are considering quitting the profession, the teaching profession, and a careers education curriculum in schools that's often very fragmented and unable to establish a strong bridge between school and the contemporary workforce. However, in our work with our 32 partner schools here in Victoria, Australia, we've found that encounters with successful, relatable role models such as alumni have an immediate positive impact on students and teachers. Bringing alumni back to school to talk to students about their career pathways not only helps teachers enrich the curriculum they teach, it also lifts the spirits and morale of teachers and endorses their values and their value and their role as educators. For example, last week, we held an alumni session that prompted a teacher to later send us a note about how excited she'd been to listen to her former student, Matt, speak to her class. And I'll just quote you what she said, and this is what she said. Wow, I was so blown away by the person Matt has become. Confident, capable, extraordinary in so many ways. I was once his teacher. Today he became mine. Matt has inspired me to continue to learn and to grow. Thank you, Matt, for reminding me why I teach. And then we have this response from a Year 9 student about a recent alumni session, which really tends to sum up the positive reactions we're seeing from students at our partner schools. And this is the quote from the Year 9 student. I took away the fact that no matter what school we go to, we can excel and make our ambition, goal, or dream happen. So really that just sums up some of our experiences with our school, and we have done surveying of teachers and alumni and students, which we have on the results of on our website if anyone wants to see it. But basically, in conclusion, our experiences at our school show that alumni networks can bring joy and many opportunities to students and teachers. State schools should be able to mobilise the untapped source of goodwill and support that alumni networks can provide. And we all win if our society's state schools have more friends than just the governments obliged to fund them. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Caroline. That was really powerful. Thanks for sharing those quotes and anecdotes, and particularly liked how you also highlighted joy as part of alumni networks. I think we tend to overlook stuff like this. Perfect. Thank you so much. I'm going to now invite Dexter to take us forward.
Yeah. Thank you, Sharon. Thank you, Carolyn. I'm Dexter. I'm representing STIR Education here. And, at STIR, we partner with governments, and our role is to partner with them to strengthen public education systems. And as you all know, public education systems are like quite complex. They are quite large scale. And the way we feel this really like works and how we strengthen them is the whole idea of intrinsic motivation, and to sort of reignite the intrinsic motivation of this enormous workforce in education, which are our teachers, our all the officials, the administrators, and things like that. And the way we have seen it work best is through networks, and so it's through learning networks where teachers or officials actually share best practices, share their challenges, problem solve together, figure out a solution together, things like that, and through improvement networks where officials together look at like what the challenge of improvement, challenge of quality improvement, and what we can do together. So that's what we found. I'm based in South India, and in the state that we work in, we again, like I said, we work in a very large scale setup. So we work with close to 50,000 teachers, representing around 12,000 schools, and that's not even the full state, right? So I think like it's quite a complex thing, and so what I wanted to share as a story was a story that happened during the school closures, which was, as you might know, India had one of the longest school closures in the world, and it was like a time where schools were shut. There was like very limited access to education the children had, and this especially affected the public education system, right? Like because and children from like rural setups and remote setups, it was really affecting them. This is a story from that time. There was a particular teacher in our network. Her name is Flora. This is a story that our team is very proud of. So this teacher she was inspired by one of the videos that we had circulated at that time to get teachers to think about the importance of academic continuity and what the consequences of learning loss could be for a child's future and things like that. And so she was inspired by that. She started exploring like technology to reach to her children. And after a month of trying that, she's found that she's only able to reach 10 of 40 children, right? And it was like quite frustrating, and that was the situation across the state. And at this point, like one of the things that she started to do was she started creating these one-page summary mind maps of a whole lesson, which she would like create really artistically, and then she made sure that she hand delivered them to all the children. And that was like it was a very inspiring story for us. And what we did was we documented that story and made sure that voice was sort of taken across the state to those 50,000 teachers. And we just thought we found it inspiring, so we did that. But the results were like really cool, because like very soon we heard from teachers from across the districts, very, very far away, saying that, okay, that really inspired, that really touched a nerve, that got me thinking that if this teacher can do this, then maybe I'll do this. And we started seeing so many innovations. Teachers started using community centers, teachers started using alumni, so many ways of like sort of working with, that time and the challenge of education. So one of the things in summary is to say that, like, especially when looking at sort of large scale systems, we feel the only way for real transformation to happen is through teacher networks, through official networks, so that there is a genuine ownership for the kind of change that governments are looking for today. So yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Dexter, and thanks for that really wonderful closing statement. I think that's the best way for sort of your bit to end. If I may hand over to Faith and invite her to share more about her work and network.
Hello, thank you so much. My name is Faith Muisyo. I serve at Dignitas as a programs director. Dignitas is an education development organization that equips and empowers educators so that they can be able to lead transformation in their schools. And we do this through professional leadership training and in-school instructional coaching. Dignitas partners with primary schools that are located within the urban informal locations or rural marginalized communities. As an organization, we do recognize the benefit of having a professional network of educators. We do have one, and we see these networks important in two broad ways. First, that of extending an organization's impact as ambassadors and agents of change. Secondly, these educators networks provide the educators with peer support and accountability that contributes to spur great practices and ongoing learning. I'm sure we've heard it said that your network is your network, and anyone really that has achieved a thing worth having has done it with the help of someone else. When I think of these networks and sharing the importance or even the value of the educators' networks, I'm going to reference a project called Project Kanya. It's an Indian word meaning girl. And we undertook a cross-country pilot program in collaboration with global school leaders. This Project Kanya trained over 220 school leaders to improve education outcomes for over 20,000 girl students in India and Kenya during the COVID-19 school closures. Specifically in Kenya, Dignitas implemented the program across 3 rural, marginalized pastoral communities that had a very high prevalence of cultural practices that disadvantage the learning of girls. So when I think of this question of why teacher networks are really important, some of the lessons that came from the interaction between the Kenya India teachers exchange was that one, these networks really provide a safe platform for shared learning, peer accountability, and also peer support. So as these teachers across the continent shared their experiences, they were able to break down the issues that were quite a barrier around these traditional cultural practices. They looked at the stereotypes, the limiting beliefs, and what seemed like very isolated country-specific issues found resonance across the continents with these teachers. And so this became such rich spaces for these teachers to be able to engage, to co-create, to collaborate, and actually find solutions that might have seemed very global, but that the teachers took at each country level, and they were able to contextualize the solutions to really speak to them. The other benefit that came out are that these educator networks are also a great source for obtaining advice and support. When you look at when these teachers came together on the online platform and on WhatsApp, they were able to share those challenges that they had around the risk of dropouts during the COVID closures. And they also were able to share available opportunities and suggested ways on how, for example, they could be able to create more gender responsive schools when that opened. And you see that really opened up the doors to valuable suggestions and guidance. And these networks offered genuine, authentic assistance to each other. And citing a very specific example, especially in Kenya, where there is a policy called delocalization, where primary school heads are usually posted outside their localities. So having that Kenya network of other school leaders allowed the new head teachers that were posted to these areas that had marginalized, with these communities to be able to learn, and they were able to provide guidance to tell them what had worked for them. The other benefit of these networks is that it provides such a rich opportunity to access resources. And we know that these resources are really key when it comes to building the capacity of any school leaders, either for short-term specific areas that they need to improve on, or even just lifelong learning. And it is in these networks, these teachers shared tools, they shared fresh ideas, new insights, information, and even data that was very specific around the issues of gender that the project was dealing with. And so when they start to be able to compare the data, they came up with very good recommendations. And so just summing what I have seen, no man or no organization is an island. And therefore, these networks increase any organization's footprint. It also raises the profile of an organization. It's basically visibility. And it is more important now than ever to be able to maintain these networks, these connections, because it is one of the ways through which credibility is built and sustained. We've always gone to places where we've had, oh, I heard about Dignitas in such and such a forum. And so these places, these networks become at times our sources of referrals, of recommendations, or even new leads. So it is important to be there in these networks because we've seen the value. Yeah.
Thanks, Faith. That was really powerful, and also thanks for bringing in the lens, about gender and girls' education. I'm sure we'll be speaking about that a little more. Jan, if I may invite you now.
Thanks, Yusra, and good morning, everyone, from Brussels. And I'm Jan, as Yusra said. I'm part of the inHive team, and I will add to the stories that you've heard from others and build on some of the observations, because as you would have heard from Yusra in the introductions about inHive and what we do, one of the types of networks that we support, similarly to Caroline and Ourschool, is also alumni networks. And so one of the stories that I want to tell is bringing the benefit of alumni networks into a different geography and a different context, and specifically think about low-cost private schools in Uganda, which was one of the geographies, or one of the spaces where we worked together with Private Education Development Network, which is a Uganda-based NGO, and it was part of our work on a UK-aid Girls Education Challenge project, also co-implemented with other organizations like Opportunity International. And so the story or the specific school that I will kind of demonstrate this issue was a school that I had the privilege to visit a few times during the implementation of the project in Jinja, which is a community or a town not too far from the capital, Kampala. It is a little bit of a tourist transit town for those tourists wanting to discover the Blue Nile. And in this community, the head teacher, Jackson, started the Jinja Parents Community School, several years ago. The typical way of finding a plot of land just outside of the school or the community, under the tree, bringing a few children and building the school up basically room by room, all the way to having dormitories now for the children. And he was a huge supporter of the alumni network program that we did with him and with the schools. And he came across as this father figure who was very much caring about the children and brought the community to the school and involved them in children's education. But a challenge that a school like his faces, and we heard a little bit from the other speakers in this, is of course teacher retention. And it's not only kind of like maybe young teachers who are joining the profession, as Caroline mentioned, but in this kind of a sector and a space, of course, there's a lot of competition amongst private schools that are targeting the poorest communities because they are low fee-paying schools. And so the teachers, of course, move around quite a lot. And there's some very interesting research that was done during the COVID pandemic about, you know, the impact of the pandemic on this, where, of course, with children not being able to go to the school and not being able to pay fees, the schools not being able to pay the teachers, burnout of the teachers who were kind of dropping out as well. And so the reason why I'm kind of thinking about the dropout as one of the issues when we talk about teachers, of course, there's also the dropout when we talk about students, which was equally a challenge for this type of a school in the communities that they serve. And COVID just exacerbated some of the issues we already saw in the project, kind of systems related issues that we saw even before. And so the alumni network really became, in this kind of a context, a way to address this systems challenge. I think a lot of the schools, for example, in this space, are drawing on their former students to become teachers at the school. So the alumni network actually, or the community, becomes a source of the teaching staff. It becomes something that makes the school more attractive and attracts more students, and more parents are willing to actually send their kids to the school or choose the school in this competitive environment, because it has this additional community element that maybe other schools don't. And of course, then there is that attractiveness that comes to the students, who are able to, you know, find in this alumni community caring adults. And, you know, in some of our earlier inACT sessions, we talked about resilience of young people and the ability to actually have somebody in your community, whether it is, you know, in your school through your teachers or your parents or other caring adults, is a source of resilience for young people. And especially for girls and other marginalized groups in different communities and sectors. So I think we can then kind of see from these examples the importance of the networks as solutions on a very community level. But I think then, you know, teachers like Jackson, and when we heard also from Faith and from Dexter, you know, coming together, you know, we are slowly building the systems level solutions from the very rooted elements, where he would, for example, organize a community of practice around himself with other school leaders to address girls' education, for example, dropout rates or other issues, with the help of the alumni networks, and they were learning together about how to do the alumni network. So I will just end there and kind of look forward to further conversations around those different levels of impact. Thanks.
Thanks, Jan, especially for sort of creating that link between the local and the community and the systems. And we'll get back to that in the dialogue that we have built in for later. Sharon, if I may invite you now to take center stage.
Thanks, Isra, and thanks, Jan. So hi, my name is Sharon Boateng. I'm the Programme Manager for the Mastercard Foundation Scholarships Programme here at the University of Edinburgh. So the Mastercard Foundation provides scholarships to institutions around the world to provide scholarship funding to young Africans to do postgraduate or undergraduate degree programmes online and in person. So this programme has been running for about 7 years at the University of Edinburgh, and we've supported 200 scholars from across the African continent. So network is central to our work in delivering programming to the scholars, because myself and my team, we see ourselves not just providing scholarship funding to students, but also providing programming to help their personal, professional, and academic developments during their time with us here at the University of Edinburgh. And this means we have to rely upon a huge number of networks to deliver this programming. And it also ties into the African philosophy of Ubuntu. So this idea that I am because we are. So the community and network is essential for us to drive things forward. And so we always have to consistently develop this sense of interdependence. So in our program, we cultivate this and realize this by making sure that we're building great networks within the University of Edinburgh. So we're supporting scholars on our program from the time they apply to scholarships to graduation, which means within our university infrastructure, we have to build good networks with those who support that process. So this can be within the admissions team, with our recruitment team, with our well-being team once the students are at the university, and also the career services if we're helping students with their career developments. So in kind of consolidating those networks within the university, we're also making sure that our scholars, many of whom are new to maybe a UK education system and culture, they're also embedded into that university system. But of course, we are supporting a wide range of scholars from across the continent, and there are many intersections that need to be considered. So some of the support networks we have in our university might not be completely fit for purpose to support our scholars' needs. And I say this because Edinburgh, if I may share, is not particularly diverse. It's kind of a monoculture. So some of the needs that we have for our students aren't really there within the university. So we have to lend on external partnerships to make sure that we're creating programming that's also rooted in the African context. So for example, we're supporting scholars with their career development. We have built partnerships with an organization called the Africa Careers Network, who provide, career mentoring, training, jobs, internships, etc., which is extremely important. We have a counseling provider in Rwanda that also provides our scholars with pastoral and emotional support during their time at the university, which comes with very, very many challenges and has that question of identity. So our counselors in the University of Edinburgh are probably rooted in a UK Edinburgh context and might not be able to wholly empathise with where our scholars are coming from, So with our team, we're really trying to strike that balance between utilising our networks within the university, but fostering good connections with our external providers, which means sometimes our team can feel like we're a bridge between those two worlds, and sometimes we can feel within and without. So we have all the benefits of these networks, but then we also have to think very carefully about what's our role in these networks, and that's constantly being redefined. But the networks are a great source of strength. As my colleagues have just shared, they provide so many different opportunities to our scholars. They really broaden our networks. They enable our scholars to feel really part of the Edinburgh community, but also the scholars still have their foot on the ground to the continent of Africa or their return after their scholarships. So making sure those connections are fostered kind of across the world while our scholars are with us. And also, in cultivating that lovely experience for our scholars while they're with us in the University of Edinburgh, we're setting up our future alumni who, can come back and give current scholars access to opportunities, mentoring, placements, because many of our scholars go off and do great things, work in really great places. And if they've had that great experience here with us at the University of Edinburgh, they too can provide that networking opportunities for, scholars on our programme. So it's just this idea of, Ubuntu, I'm going to end with that to end this story. I am because we are, and there is a power network. We can't do anything individually. And I really think the success of our scholars program at the University of Edinburgh is reliant on these networks. I'm happy to kind of dig a bit deeper into that in this session. Thank you.
Thanks, Sharon. That was wonderful. I really enjoying how the themes of I am because we are, and I think it was mentioned earlier that anyone who does anything worth doing has had help. I think those illustrate the power of networks wonderfully. I'm now going to invite all of our wonderful panelists to just reflect and respond to anything that you heard from anyone else that resonated with you.
I wanted to kind of raise about the pandemic and this. I think maybe here in the UK, this sense, I think we do come from quite an individualistic society. And during the pandemic, it really challenged society to realize the power of community to get through a really challenging time. And I heard that kind of the impacts of COVID was really prevalent in the teaching community. How did that network maybe create a sense of community and support in a really, historically challenging period? I think you'd all kind of touched on that, but it'd be great to hear a bit more.
Maybe I'll just kick off. Thanks so much, Sharon, for that question. And I think I was also reflecting on what you were saying in terms of the understanding of the local context and the needs of a specific community. And I think that is something we really do want to think about in terms of what are networks looking like in different places and what are they mobilized to do and how do we help to mobilize them. Because I think, just kind of reflecting on, the difference with the COVID pandemic, I think, in the context of Uganda, I mean, I know, Dexter, you mentioned that India had some of the longest closures of schools, and I think, you know, Uganda actually had 2 years of full closures. And so, again, the kind of like the responses in that context, and also responses around schools that are low cost, you know, private schools, again, it's very different, and the ability of the community to respond to the challenges really depends. You know, the schools, for example, didn't necessarily have the IT resources, you know, to go fully remote, even if, or some of the teachers didn't have necessarily the skills, for example, to do that, and the schools didn't have the money to actually develop the schools, the teachers' skills in that. So I think it's really valuable what you were saying in terms of being very mindful of like, what are the specific needs and what is the specific context, because that will shape the responses and like what we understand as a community and what we understand as a network and how it operates.
I would say in the Victorian context here in Australia, Melbourne metropolitan schools were locked down and closed and went on to online learning for many, many months during the pandemic. And one thing that we were able to do in our partner schools, where we had been helping them establish their alumni networks, we were able to run alumni sessions online where we had alumni beamed in internationally as well as locally to speak to classes. So that was one upside of the pandemic, that we were able to reach out via Zoom calls and have Q&A panels with alumni and students and teachers via you know, webinars, etc. And that worked very well for many of those alumni who no longer live and work in their local communities where they grew up.
I think yeah, just to add as well, I think we saw some very interesting things of like teachers really relying on networks for that sense of community. Like very early in the pandemic, when there was like so much confusion about what is all this about, and there was so much like panic. There were stories of some of our teachers actually sending voice notes and sort of lullabies to young children in their classrooms, about kind of trying to explain and help them make sense of what's happening in the world. And I think there were also experiences of just small groups of teachers, like 3-4 teachers, 5 officials, getting on conference calls and just sort of like debriefing. How do we like just make sense of the world around? Just I think that we found the networks being a huge part of how teachers sort of self cared for themselves. Took care of their own well-being during that, especially the first few months of the pandemic, and that ultimately led to them being able to care for the children.
Yeah, thank you, Dexter. Just building onto some of those conversations and really going back to what Sharon has shared around the Ubuntu, and you are because I am, and reflecting back to that COVID period within the school closures, I think that long period really opened a much deeper need for connection, because people were in their homes and there was no school to go to, teachers did not go to school. The period of really much activity had really scaled down. And so there was this need, after a period of time, we need to connect. We need to be able to know how we can, figure out once the schools reopen, how the learners, really get back. And what we really found helpful is with this, the Kenya Indian dialogue that was really online. Most of these teachers had never had an online really conversation before, and so that was a time Zoom and all these other ways of connecting virtually that became really the way to be able to connect. And so they actually found a group of people that they could be able to walk alongside with. You know, at times when you're looking for a breakthrough, you tend to feel like I'm the only person that's going through a particular issue. But just the collaboration, the sharing, and seeing that, you know, we are in this together really opened up what initially might have looked at like a very transactional process. We just need to connect, really transformed into one where people are looking for authentic connections and to really support each other. And I would say maybe it was a blessing in disguise, because we did see a lot of growth in terms of connections during that COVID season. And just to be able to say, yes, it might look like as networks begin, it's very transactional, but as they define what the issues are that are bringing them together, and those ones are really clear, there's always value in working alongside each other to be able to find a lasting solution.
Thanks, Faith. Jan, if I may invite you to share some thoughts before we open it to the audience.
Sorry, say that again.
I would love to give you a chance to share any thoughts that you may have before we open to the audience.
Oh, well, I was just, we can just move to the, sorry, happy to move to the audience to give them the space as well. Thanks.
Perfect. Thanks. We'll get back to this dialogue. So there'll be more of this. I'd like to now, I see some messages. Oh, that's Gemma. I'd like to invite people in the audience to share any of your own maybe inspirational stories that you witnessed in your own work, or you know, in your partner's work. Any questions that you may have for the panelists. I know that I have some, or anything that resonated with you. We'll take 2 minutes for this. I'll just turn on some music. So let's just all reflect and chat.
Hello.
Yes, hello.
Yeah, can I speak?
Devika, I'll just hand over to you to speak in 1 minute.
Okay.
If you'd like, you can also leave your comment in chat, but you can also speak. Just give me a minute first. Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry for the abrupt end to the music. I just think maybe I will just give some space to audience members to share. Devika, if I can call on you, and then maybe you can just briefly share your comment, and then we can hand over to the panelists again. Thanks.
So good afternoon, everyone. I was taken up by the concept of Ubuntu IM because that is something really nice. Actually, this was what had happened when STIR Education came to Tamil Nadu, our state. They had a thing called Padlet where teachers would share their experiences, put up photographs and small videos of their children's work and how they reached out to them. So that way, teachers who were feeling hapless, like how do I reach out to my students, got an idea of how they could reach out to their students. So I think that was a very nice thing which STIR Education did for us. I wanted to share that here. Thank you.
Thanks, Devika. We appreciate you sharing that. Perfect. There are some questions in chat. If anyone from the panelists would like to respond to those.
I would maybe just kick off, and I think also building on the concept of Ubuntu, and then the question around kind of, I guess, the relationship of that together with this idea of a network. And I think it's a, you know, we definitely have communities and relationships around us. And, you know, it's not to kind of say that networks are kind of superseding that, but it's about finding, as kind of network practitioners, finding the right approach to harness those relationships that are already there, or to kind of put together enabling processes and structures to emphasize what's already in that community. And so it is really kind of, I think, kind of recognizing the relationships that are at the heart of that and mobilizing those and nurturing those. So, you know, it was, just going back to the example I was saying in my kind of the story, that it was the kind of the care and the love and the nurturing relationships at the school that kind of brought the alumni first to the school, back to the school, and then it was about us kind of helping the school kind of put together certain, you know, processes, relationships, etc., to mobilize that. But I think, you know, as we think about, you know, post-COVID recovery in particular, it's about, you know, how can we make investments into organizations that can nurture the community, recognizing that the community has been mobilized and existing and is so powerful in many of the spaces where we work.
I just wanted to kind of jump on to Jan's comment and just to agree, I share that kind of idea that, you know, it's about kind of values, networks, you know, and I think Faith had mentioned that sometimes, you know, when we're asking for projects to move forward and we're working with big groups of people and things are happening at great speed, it can feel very transactional, but kind of cultivating this sense of love and care and interest and patience in all of the people that you're engaging with. It's not easy work, actually. It's big work when, you know, there's so many demands on each individual's time, but actually that's what sustains the network. You know, whether it's in person or online, that, you know, sense of care and interest in, you know, each of your network members, simple things like asking how are people's day, how are they coping with the pandemic. It's really transformative because you don't know when you're having a, you know, a Zoom meeting with your stakeholders or your colleagues, what they faced, you know, that morning or that afternoon. And, you know, it's about connection, and connection isn't just about the project work, isn't it? It's an emotion and a feeling, and it takes time to nurture. So some rambling thoughts, but I just wanted to share that I think those values are really important to this work, and that we shouldn't underestimate, you know, how much work it is to do that consistently, especially in challenging contexts.
I think just following on from that sense of belonging and sense of being cared for by a network, that's very important for teachers and students, that they don't feel alone in this. I know it sounds strange to say, but I think especially here in Australia, secondary schools are very large organisations compared with primary schools, for example, and they can become cocoons in the sense that they are not particularly connected to their local community, apart from maybe their parent community, students' parents. But you know, bringing an alumni network into a school and so that it's part of the school's tradition and culture, I think students and teachers then feel the warm embrace of that relationship, because they know that there are other people who are part of the school community that care about them. And alumni of schools, they, if you think about it, they're the people who have the strongest emotional bond to a school out in the community. So, you know, many governments often in their policy making are exhorting school principals and teachers to make connections with community. Well, that's very hard to do when you're busy teaching students, and to develop those relationships and with industry or, you know, employers, etc. But if you have a well-organised, thriving alumni program embedded in your school culture, then it is much, much easier through those strong relationships for teachers to reach out and find employers who are part of the alumni network, who might offer a work experience placement, or who might come into the classroom and enrich the module that the teacher is teaching to students in terms of the subject matter, by bringing that to life, talking about their particular expertise, whether it's a scientist talking to a class studying a biology subject, or it might be a professional writer, a journalist coming into an English class. So it's much easier and more effective to make those community connections through the people that love you the most, and that's your alumni community.
Just listening to what Carol, Sharon, and I think Ian had mentioned earlier, when we are looking at building the system level solutions, it obviously begins with some of these networks from the grassroots, and just individually, the beauty of building and sustaining. It's important to sustain. It could be very simple things like being able to, the real power of unlocking the hidden power of this connection is reaching out to people and supporting when you really don't expect anything in return. And so a simple thing as from either our business or even social platforms where stories of impact have been shared, going in there, leaving an advice, a recommendation, a positive remark, and before you know it, what was really started as a very innocent gesture, then you'd find incrementally as you grow in, then it really influences a lot. So I think there is a role, even individually, as we look at these networks, to be able to build from bottom up by being very deliberate in terms of how we respond to some of these networks, even at a personal level.
Just I think really inspired by what everyone is sharing, and this whole idea of how I think what I'm thinking about is this idea of how, like, when we go through challenging times, we need to turn to one another, and we need to turn to each other for support. And I'm just I think, like, even if that can happen with a government, if a system actually starts to turn to its own people in a time where there is less clarity, when there's a lot of ambiguity, I think there is a lot of there's a lot of resource and power and knowledge just within within people, and to be able to turn to them is the so I think in response to one of the questions, there was one like when India was going through its second wave, there was just so much devastation, so many people dying, and like there were just people, everybody had somebody they had lost in their family. And at that time we got this very interesting request from one of the governments we worked with, and they had asked us to actually design a prayer meeting. So, like a design team which would usually like create like curriculum and pedagogical stuff, they were asked to create a structure of a prayer meeting, because that's what teachers and officials felt like they needed at that time, where they could come and they could share and share their suffering, hear each other, and just experience that sense of. I think I think that was an example for us of an idea from like where the system actually turned to the people and responded to what they needed, and I feel like that's really the way also for pandemic readiness and things like that, right? Because at a time when all that we trust goes out of the window, we need to trust each other, right? I think that's for the idea.
I know we're almost at the time, Muisyo, sorry, but I think just to kind of celebrate what Dexter just said, because I think what we have been hearing, I think, throughout the festival is this importance about how we build those relationships and how do we enter into the partnerships, and what are some of the skills and mindsets we have to do that. And I think this kind of being able to listen and coming, almost with sense of humility and respect for one another into these partnerships is the kind of coming from what you were saying, Dexter, in terms of to be able to build those bridges, whether it is within the community, to do the kind of bottom up, systems change that Faith you were talking about, because I think that's where the kind of the expertise of the community builders come in, and that's where the support of the government and others need to come in, is this: we need to learn how to do this, how to come into those relationships, especially across the divides of the power, whether it is within the state and internationally and globally as well, because otherwise you won't be able to have those relationships and those connections that will yield those impacts.
Thanks, Jan, for putting that together so beautifully. I just want to say really genuine and sincere thanks to our sort of panelists. I have been a teacher in low resource settings, and there's some of these concepts that I've grappled with before, but I know that had I been sort of privy or privileged enough to sort of hear this conversation many years ago, I know that my own sort of approach towards my students and fellow teachers in government schools would have been very different. And really, thank you so much. And of course, thanks to everyone who joined. I'm just going to take a few quick seconds to share and talk about next steps. I know that Gemma shared in chat that we'd love to hear any action items, any sort of things you're taking away with you today. I know that I'm definitely thinking more, empathetically about the people who make up our networks, who make up our school systems. Sometimes we do tend to, I don't want to use the word demonize, but sometimes we do tend to sort of, think about people, who make up the systems in opposing ways. But I think it's really about building connections and trust and remembering that I am because we are. So I just wanted to quickly share my screen again. And yeah, just wanted to urge everyone to, I guess, think more about, what are the next steps. We really hope that this conversation and also other conversations that we've been having this month, that's just the beginning. That's just the tip of the iceberg, that we have opportunities to collaborate more, to think more deeper about these things and really sort of affect change when it comes to behaviors and mindsets. And so we really, we would love it if anyone wants to reach out, if you want to share LinkedIn profiles in chat. Really, it's all about collaboration and connection to take this forward. I would like to quickly invite everyone in the audience to unmute themselves and just say a human goodbye. And yeah, it's been lovely. It's been lovely to see everyone. Thanks for joining, everyone. Just unmute and say bye to everyone so we can all hear you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining.
Hi, Dennis.